Good afternoon, everyone. This is Erica Oriens from the Michigan Center for Student Success. I hope you're all having a great day, and welcome to our webinar today on transfer effectiveness, new research from the Community College Research Center. I'm joined today by Davis Jenkins from CCRC, and we're delighted to be able to share with you some of the really terrific research that CCRC has been doing around transfer. But before we get into Davis's slides, I want to just give you some instruction on how you can participate in today's webinar. On your screen, you should see your participation pane, which has an orange button where you can open and close that participation pane. And typically down towards the bottom, you'll see a question pane in there. If you have questions for Davis throughout his presentation, please include those in the question pane. We will interrupt the presentation and ask Davis to respond to those questions as they come in. And then also we'll have a little bit of time at the end for you. Hopefully we'll have a little time at the end for you to be able to ask questions. But before I turn it over to Davis, I wanted to steal about 5 minutes of this presentation to just share with you a couple of updates on some of the projects that the Center for Student Success has in the state of Michigan here in partnership with the Michigan Association of State Universities and the Michigan Independent Colleges and Universities. So as some of you may know, together we went to the legislature and received a one-time appropriation from the state of Michigan to focus on two major projects. One is to replace the Michigan Transfer Network and to work with institutions, administration, and faculty to build associate to bachelor's degree transfer pathways. And as part of this work, and with the support from the state, we created a project website, which you can find at www.mytransfer.net. And that has a lot of information about the project. You can review project materials and look at our upcoming events. I would encourage you to navigate to the news tab and subscribe to the newsletter, which would come into your inbox about every month to share updates on the project. And then, Davis, if you can advance to the next slide, I'll also suggest that you go to the About the Project tab on the website, and there are two videos on there. The first one is about 2 minutes long, and the second one is 4 minutes long. And in those videos really provide a very comprehensive overview of the project that we're working on in the state of Michigan. Many of you who are on this webinar are intimately familiar with this project or are very familiar with transfer. But you may be working with folks with faculty in various different departments who may want to know more about the work that's going on. And this 6 minutes of video is a really great opportunity to provide that overview of the project that we're working on. So just wanted to take a couple minutes at the beginning to talk about that. On the last tab of that website, there is a contact tab, and that has my contact information on there, as well as Will Emerson and Colby Cesaro, from our sister organizations here in Lansing, who you can contact if you have any questions about that project. We're always happy to talk with people about that work. So with that said, I will introduce Davis Jenkins. Davis Jenkins is a senior research scholar at the Community College Research Center. CCRC was created in 1996, so just celebrating their 22nd anniversary. It's housed at the Teachers College at Columbia University, and is really the leading independent authority on the nation's nearly 1,200 two-year colleges. They focus a lot of research, and Davis does as well, on improving the effectiveness in two and 4 year institutions, and transfer, helping transfer students earn college degrees, and helping identify strategies to help students enter a program of study suited to their interests and aspirations through guided pathways work that CCRC has really developed and led. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Davis.
Thanks, Erica. It's good to be with you, Michiganders. I'm based in Chicago, so I frequently escape the urban jungle to come over and party with you guys. I'm sorry my colleague John Fink is not with us. His granddad died, and he indicated that his grandfather was a yupper. And I go, well, he was a yuppie? No, yupper. So I learned that that is the Upper Peninsula, one of the most beautiful parts of the country. So this is for all the yuppers out there. Did I mispronounce it? I'm just a city boy. Yupper. Okay, thank you.
It is Yupper, yep.
Okay, good. Thank you. You spared me a bar fight somewhere in Michigan, so thank you, Yupper. So this is for all the Yuppers out there and the rest of people in Michigan, and anyone who can get money out of the Michigan legislature, even a one-time appropriation, I'm all for. So I just wanted to review some of the research we've been doing about outcomes of transfer, some of the barriers that students face, some of which haven't received much attention in research and practice, and then some research we did with Aspen on how to improve outcomes. And so in general, I guess I should preface this by saying in CCRC's research and other research across the country, we're seeing that the returns to sub-baccalaureates, specifically certificates by themselves, and even associate degrees not to be as robust as bachelor's and beyond. And since the recovery started, we've seen big growth in low education jobs, but also in bachelor's and beyond jobs. So students increasingly, even in trades fields, eventually, especially if they're younger, they're going to need bachelor's degrees. And when we look at this group of students who entered community colleges for the first time, higher ed first time through a community college, 80% want to earn a bachelor's degree. And I'm saying, based on the research on the returns to education, that they're right. Unfortunately, nationally, only about a third transfer, and of those who transfer, only less than a third get a associate degree or certificate before they transfer. And then within 6 years, only about 14% earn a bachelor's degree. Even if that's 6 years of starting at community college, even if you go 6 years after the point of transfer, it's still fewer than 1 in 5 getting a bachelor's degree over long periods of time. Sort of more distressing than that is we see tremendous gaps in terms of income, by income, and even starker gaps to some extent, especially with Black students and Hispanic students, in terms of race, of students starting at a community college getting bachelor's degrees. So we got a issue on our hands. In Michigan, Michigan's above the national average a little bit in terms of the percentage of students who transfer out, but of those who transfer out, only less than a quarter get a community college award before they transfer. And this is potentially problematic because a lot of research we and others have done find that students who get an associate degree are more likely to get a bachelor's degree, although they end up earning a lot of credits, and we'll talk about that. But also, since many students who transfer don't get a bachelor's degree or may take time to getting a bachelor's degree, research my colleague Clive Belfield has done shows that, it helps them in the labor market to have that associate degree or certificate before they transfer. And then in terms of among those who transfer, Michigan is below the national average. Among those who transfer who get a bachelor's degree 6 years after they transfer. And one reason for this seems to be overall, this is the transfer in bachelor's completion rates for Michigan public 4 years in the blue and private nonprofits in the orange or whatever weird color that is. I hope these aren't like the colors of some hated Michigan rival like Ohio State. No, even I know they're not blue and orange. But anyhow, so your publics this is the percentage of students who your universities receive who graduate with a bachelor's 6 years after entering a community college. About average, the privates way below. I suspect, I don't know, but if there's some big online private nonprofit, this isn't the for-profit providers, the nonprofits, we're seeing low completion rates. Among the for-profits nationally, the equivalent rate here is 8%. So we've got to be careful about students transferring to fully online institutions. I know I've made a lot of friends with that comment. Overall, of students in Michigan who started a community college, about the national average, about 13% get a bachelor's degree within 6 years of starting. And again, the majority of students come in thinking that they're going to get a bachelor's degree, and I'm saying they're going to need a bachelor's degree, most of them, given the way the economy is going. This is looking at highest outcomes for students who started a community college nationally and in Michigan. So if I get a certificate and associate degree, I would be counted as, my highest outcome would be associate degree. If I get an associate and bachelor's, my highest outcome would be a bachelor's. And you see overall, the bottom thing is certificates. These are 12% earned an associate degree, 14% earned a bachelor's degree. I know that's different than the 13% I just showed you, but this includes, I gather, 1%, about 500,000 of these students earned or 50,000 of these students earned a bachelor's through a community college. And then these are students, this 5% are students who transferred with a community college award, but didn't get a bachelor's degree. And then these are really interesting. 13% transferred, but didn't get a bachelor's degree. 7% are still enrolled in a community college 6 years later and got nothing. So we see lots of opportunity for improving graduation by this 20% here, which would jettison you over 50% completion and put you in the at or near the top of the national rankings in terms of completion. And big gaps in this in terms of lower income students. Only 29% get any kind of degree after 6 years in Michigan versus 42% of higher income students. So higher income students in Michigan, as many other places, are doing pretty well. But low income students, we have lots of work to do. And we also look at of those who transfer and get bachelor's degree, what are they earning bachelor's degrees in? And man, business is big in Michigan because 30% of students who started a community college transferred got a bachelor's degree in business, which is substantially higher than the national average at 19%. Michigan does okay in engineering. So that seems to be the big area where there's difference. Many more in getting a bachelor's degree in business, fewer in arts and humanities and English, fewer in social and behavioral sciences. So, I mean, this is very big picture, we know, but our big thing is we got to focus not just on our students transferring and completing bachelor's degree, but in what field. Because as I'll show later, this really, the field matters to the student and obviously to completion. This is breaking down those same numbers by lower income and higher income students. Don't seem huge difference there across fields, but it's interesting to see where students are going, and whether this is intentional or whether they're sometimes getting into default degrees just based on, trying to get out with something. So we and many others have done a lot of research on the barriers students have to transfer. A lot of these have been talked about nationally, but recent research that we've done and others really point to three areas that we really got to think about. The first one is that transfer paths are unclear and advising and planning are inadequate, where inadequate is a nice euphemism. we have other words for it in Chicago. But this is an exercise we're not going to run through now. You may have seen this, but just go on your website. Imagine you're a student entering a community college in Michigan, and you know, you want to know, you're interested in biosciences, and you want to know what are the biosciences programs at local universities, what career options are available to you after you transfer, what do salaries look like, and then, you know, what are the requirements for the university admissions bioscience program? What classes will I need to take at the community college in Michigan if I want to transfer to a Michigan University bioscience program? How difficult or easy was it to find this information? And you can guess we've done this many times. We've done this actually in Michigan as part of Kresge-funded research with students. They can't do it. We've done it with faculty. They can't do it, and in both 2- and 4-year institutions. So put yourself, if you're a university, in the place of a student entering a local community college. Look at their website, look at your website, because these are how students are finding this. I did this in a meeting in Texas where we were looking at transfer from Austin Community College to University of Texas at Austin, and I had a ringer. She was an advisor at Austin Community College, recent graduate, bachelor's degree from University of Texas at Austin. I'm like, damn, I'm gonna, you know, this is gonna be bingo for me. Turns out she couldn't figure out some of these things. So I'm like, oh, so this is hard. And in general, when we talk to transfer students, it's just, I just want to cry because, man, they're confused. They're getting the runaround from both sides. This is not just community college, university. They're just getting a raw deal. And, you know, people are pissed off and policymakers are pissed off, and we gotta fix this issue. You know, we talk about the 2+2, but nationally, only 8% of students who started community college transfer and get a bachelor's degree. So these are among students who are successful transfers, follow the 2+2. My colleague John, I'm doing this in his honor and his Uper granddad's honor. You know, he's done all this stuff showing how you know, chaotic and varied the transfer patterns are. Many students transfer in the fall, you know, because we think in terms of 2+2, and every student starts in the fall with a beanie on their head. But, you know, in fact, many students start in the spring and summer. And then they're transferring, you know, across many years, not just after the second year. So almost a third of students transfer from 3 to 6 years, which of course is going to affect whether they can complete a bachelor's degree in 6 years, even assuming if they've gotten the credits. This was a study we did for Google. Google has a very varied workforce internationally, but not a very diverse workforce nationally. They're seeing, you know, 1.8 million students entering higher education through community college, the largest share of Latinos, the largest share of low-income students, very high share of minority of Black students, and you know, saying, well, how can we get more students from community colleges into bachelor's degrees? So we did this study for them, which tracked students who started in community college over time, and of 1.8 million students who started community college in 2007, only about 3,300, or 0.02%, I think it's 0.02% get a computer science bachelor's degree in 7 years. And you see at the bottom of those 3,300 students, they took 1,200 unique paths to those degrees. Even more discouraging, the students who were successful in starting community college and transferring, getting a CS degree, a bachelor's degree, tended to be from higher income families. They tended to live near a tech hub. So they were in a milieu, especially if they're from higher income families where they know people in the tech industry, or their parents do, or they're exposed to it. And they stayed at the community college for a relatively short time. And then there was a follow-up study by a consulting firm that did focus groups with students in programming classes in the community, in 2 or 3 Silicon Valley area community colleges. And these students were interested in computer science and the like. And they did focus groups for them. And, you know, one thing that was very clear was that they had really no idea. They didn't have any exposure to what higher education or careers in computer science were like. Many of them were assuming that they could transfer to bachelor's degrees in CS programs when in fact they were in information technology sub-baccalaureate applied degrees, which aren't bad in itself. But the point is these students really didn't know. So a lot has to do, this isn't just about academic readiness and planning, it's about exposing students to the worlds of high technology, upper division education and careers. And on that note, an interesting study by our colleague Julie Wong at UW-Madison, those damn Badgers, is that right, or are they beavers? Anyhow, one of those bad rodent animals. She looked at students who start in community college, transfer, and get STEM bachelor's degrees, and did data mining around those students, and found that students were more likely to follow this pattern, to start in community college, transfer, and get STEM bachelor's if they took a STEM course first and then went through the math sequence, rather than the other way around. And this is adding to a growing body of evidence from education, higher education, but also many other fields that you know, having a purpose first, or at least a direction and an interest and a passion to pursue, and then having a plan, which you may change over time, that's fine, but at least you have a plan at every point and you know where you are, is really important, is as important than academic preparation. So what we generally say is, look, to community colleges, your students are not academically ready. I can tell you that. You don't even need to take the inaccurate placer. They are not academically ready. But the first thing to ask is, what are you interested in? And this is work we're seeing in Michigan around the guided pathways, where in the first term, they're taking a course in a field they think they might be interested in. And they're exploring career and transfer options as part of a first term year seminar course. And then by the end of that first term, they're developing a full program plan. And by full program, I mean if they're intending to transfer to Central in bio, or transfer somewhere, maybe a couple universities options in bio, they have a plan in place at the end of their first term, and they can begin scheduling their second term. And they may change over time, and that's fine, but the plan changes with them, and they have a frame with which to do that. Many bachelor's degree students intend to transfer, but they don't transfer. As my friend Rob Johnstone says, they leave cards on the table. This was a study of students in Virginia who started community college who explicitly said they wanted a bachelor's degree. This wasn't just all community colleges. These were students who said they wanted a bachelor's degree. And overall, about 23% of those students transferred. But even among those who got an associate degree, 68% transferred to a four-year institution, but almost a third did not transfer. So they got an associate degree, and they proved, at least to me, that if you can get an associate degree from a community college, I guarantee these students can get a bachelor's from any institution in Virginia or Michigan. These students are ready, but many of them aren't transferring, which is problematic for the reasons we said at the start. They need it. And look, we find that even students who take 60 or more college credit, fewer than 60% are transferring, 40% are not transferring. So they're leaving their cards on the table. They've shown, at least us, that they can be academically successful. They've indicated a desire to transfer, but they're somehow discouraged from doing that. And we think part of the reason may be this last barrier, which is that there is rampant, inequitable, I would say epidemic, inequitable transfer credit loss. which leads to extra time to degree, extra costs for students and the taxpayer, and decreased likelihood of completion. You can tell with all those words that we're not happy about this. You may have seen the GAO study, which estimated that students starting in a community college, even transferring to a four-year public, are losing over 22% of their credits. They're losing over 1 in 5 of their credits. Those transferring to a for-profit, losing a lot. And I know the for-profits sound very accommodating often, but we really have to look at the data. Paul Attewell and Dave Monahan did a study using national data, which they found that under 60% of students who started community college and transferred to a four-year were able to transfer most of their credits. 15% hardly transferred, basically had to start over. And those who were able to transfer most of their credits were 2.5 times more likely to get their bachelor's degree. So the issue here is not transferability of credit per se, as I think most of you know on the phone. It is applicability. Do the credits are they not just accepted by Ferris State, but do they apply to a bachelor's in bio or in nursing from Ferris State? Applicability is king. So we looked at this issue of why students who are transferring are earning so many excess credits. We looked at students in 2 states. Michigan wasn't one of them, but I think these 2 states we looked at, which are anonymous, are not terribly different from Michigan in many respects. And we looked at students who started community colleges, transferred to a public four-year, and got bachelor's degrees. So these were successful students. And we measured, we looked at for every bachelor's degree they got, a student got, how many credits did that bachelor's required? Because we know nursing bachelor's sometimes require more credits than, say, humanities bachelor's. And then we measured over and above that the number of credits that students took over and above that. And overall, in one state, it was the average number of credits attempted over and above what they needed for their bachelor's degree was 29. Now, the other state did a little better, 27. But obviously, both of those ain't pretty. That's almost 2 full-time terms worth of credits that they're taking. Now, some of these, and you can see the disparities, especially troubling for African-American students. I mean, these are students who succeeded, but research that we've done, but also folks like Paul Attewell and Dave Monahan, that study I mentioned, their research shows, I think, pretty convincingly that this is for students completed, but earning all these credits that aren't counting to a degree is really discouraging for students. And their research suggests that it prevents many students, they just give up and say, I feel like I'm getting the runaround and never get there. And research that Public Agenda has done show that students, especially those from low-income and minority backgrounds, blame themselves for what is a systemic problem. Now, part of this is that, disadvantaged students are taking more developmental education credits at the community college and through the work Michigan community colleges are doing on co-requisite and other accelerated strategies, which the 4 years need to help them with and do themselves. I think we're going to help address this, but we did data mining to really try to understand what lay behind this. And I don't know what this means, these trees, but I just love the way they look. But what we found was we're essentially doing partition analysis, which is a data mining technique to partition the data into trying to explain something, which in this case is excess credits attempted by students who started community college and earned a bachelor's degree. We hypothesized that DevEd and student characteristics would be a big factor, and it was. But in both states, and interestingly, in one of the states we had data on four-year students, in both states the biggest factor was essentially the percentage of 1 and 200 level courses that you take after 60 credits. So in other words, unless you're taking the right gen ed courses, the right general education courses for your major, at least your broad area, before 60 credits, that is before you're supposed to be a junior, it's almost guaranteed that you're going to get excess credits, even if you go on and get a degree. But then, traditionally within community colleges, what have we said? Oh, you're interested in transferring? Well, to keep your options open, you should take your gen eds, and here they are. And not only is the student confused by this, I think students who read this should at least get like an honorary associate degree and can interpret this in runology or something. But our research shows, and universities tell us, and students tell us, that students in the community college need to decide early on at least the broad field they're going to major in, if not the specific major, and to take the right gen ed courses and pre-major courses, obviously, for that field. So this, again, is related to the pathways work going on in Michigan, which Michigan colleges are a leader in the country, which is exposing students early on, when they come in the door, or ideally beginning in high school, to career and college planning and exploration around particular fields, and getting them on a plan in a broad field, and then narrowing down relatively quickly. I should say that the research shows that early major changes actually are good for students, but late major changes are what kill them. So we want to have students explore, but do so within the first the first year. By the end of the first year, definitely, you need to really have a pretty good idea of what you're doing. Changes after that, we find, hurt students in terms of excess credits and the like. So,
hey, David, can I ask you a question on the data that you were sharing earlier? Do those credits attempted include developmental education credits?
They do, and we put with these data mining techniques, and we put those in our model. And I hypothesized that would be the big driver in both states. And we put those with a bunch of other variables. In one state, I think we had 120 variables. That's the beauty of this data mining for looking at course taking. So, but what was surprising, DevEd is a factor, but it's this keep students who are taking essentially freshman and sophomore courses when they should be juniors, that really is even stronger than DevEd. Another thing, though, that we find, which is distressing, is that students who take a substantial percentage of proportion, a lot of DevEd, shockingly few, well, maybe not shocking, but very few ever make it to a bachelor's degree. But,
yeah, and then also the person that asked this question abbreviated that to DE credits, and somebody else thought maybe that meant dual enrollment. And so I don't know if you can speak to, I know you have started doing some new research on dual enrollment. How can you kind of help us understand how that affects all this work too?
Yes, so we're doing research on dual enrollment because we think that, especially to get at equity issues, you're going to have to start, colleges and universities are going to have to start working with the schools to start doing this exploration in high school. And because dual enrollment courses are offered by colleges, these are their courses, they can start using it more strategically. We're seeing evidence. So we did a report in October looking state by state at outcomes of dual enrollment. In general, supporting research that a lot of people have done. Dual enrollment outcomes are stronger than for that students tend to graduate at a high rate in the shorter time, but there are big gaps in income, among income, and we suspect also on race, although we didn't have race. But we're also seeing evidence across the country, and this is the current focus of our work, that the same problem that students experience in transferring from community college in other words, their credits aren't transferring toward a bachelor's degree, we're seeing in dual enrollment. There was a study funded by Greater Texas Foundation of students who were in early college high school, which is a form of dual enrollment that Jobs for the Future and others have supported, has very strong research behind it. We're unable to transfer more than a quarter toward a bachelor's degree, more than a quarter of their credits. And we're doing research now in Tennessee, Ohio, and Washington, and our preliminary evidence is showing similar things, because these students are often just taking random credits, and that's verbatim from students we've talked to. I just took some random credits, or they're taking credits, to jack up their GPAs, or so I think as colleges and universities, we have a lot at stake here, because dual enrollment in general is effective. We have to make it much more efficient, and we're starting to see parents and families say, look, you told us this was going to be a great deal, and my kid got all these credits, but they ain't applying toward the bachelor's degree. Dual enrollment is very big in rural areas, and in Iowa, as an example, in many colleges, very substantial numbers of the community college students. I was talking to the provost and chief IR person at Iowa State, like Michigan State, land-grant, high-tech institution, and a lot of these students in Iowa are getting associate degrees when they're getting high school diplomas. And they're saying that these students, they're not taking the right credits for a major. These are obviously very capable students. So they're recommending, Iowa State was recommending to their community college, look, take fewer courses, and they were saying, like, the sweet spot seemed to be like between 12 and 18 credits, 12 and 20 some credits, but make sure they're taking courses in a field of interest, and also advise those students too on not just college readiness, but college readiness for bio at Iowa State, or for engineering, or whatever. So early indications are that the same problem applies for dual enrollment students, but it's also an opportunity, since we as higher education institutions are offering those courses, to remedy that. And this would be good for Michigan and Michigan colleges and universities. So just briefly to conclude, I want to talk about the transfer playbook. So we've gone through a lot of this, these problems that students face. So what we did with Aspen Institute was we used the clearinghouse data and statistical models to identify partnerships of 2- and 4-year institutions across the country that have especially strong bachelor's degree outcomes for students who start at community colleges, controlling for student and institutional characteristics, including student makeup, student race, SES, and institutional resources and selectivity, which obviously play a big role in this, and identified a group of partnerships across the country that, these weren't the only high-performing institutions, but we wanted to choose institutions across the country of different types, from the UMass Amherst to Florida International to Eastern Connecticut. So you got regionals in there, you got, Research Ones, University of Washington, UMass Amherst. You got a whole range of types of institutions and community colleges and sort of urban, rural, and different parts of the country. And from that, distilled in this transfer playbook, which we wrote with Josh Weiner and his colleagues at Aspen Institute, this playbook in which we identify 3 bodies of practice, 3 areas of practice. I won't go through them, I'll refer you to the playbook, but prioritize transfer student success, which means really prioritize it, including track those students if you're a university, not just your first-time students. For community college, and this is really critical, it means owning the student success toward a bachelor's degree, even though you don't offer, in many cases, that bachelor's degree, which I know it's hard to do, but but this is really important. And then putting your money where your mouth is. We're finding all of these institutions, especially the universities, spending substantial amounts of money working with community colleges on advising and the like, but their business models are showing that it is useful, it works for them. It's worth the investment. Second area is not just to create clear programmatic pathways and maps and the like, but to make sure that the instruction is aligned. And again, this isn't just curriculum alignment. It's, you know, our students learning the kind, like, for example, Florida International in their bio and Psych 101 and Psych 102 courses required students who are going to major to do actual field work and statistical analysis. At Broward College and Miami-Dade College in their Psych 101 and 102, they hadn't been doing that. So students could get an A in 101 and 102 at Broward or Miami-Dade, transfer to Florida International, and they're behind in terms of their learning compared to students who started Florida International. And so they adapted their Broward and Miami-Dade have adapted their Psych 101 and 102 curriculum accordingly. That's the kind of alignment that we're talking about. And then provide students with tailored advising. All of the universities that we looked at had specialized advising. Again, costly, but they're doing this both for mission as well as business reasons. For transfer students, because they find they have different needs than you know, the students coming in with beanies, 18 years old, and big emphasis, as I mentioned before, for the community colleges on not just, you know, transfer advising generically, but helping students early on choose a path and making sure that their plan, they're taking the courses that they will need for their major, and that will apply toward their bachelor's degree, and that will give them a sense of how we're seeing in many of these colleges, community colleges, developing not a 2-year or a financial aid plan to the 2-year college to a 2-year credential, but really focusing on the 4-year credential, because we know, you know, with Pell Grants, community college students can, you know, pay for a lot of the community college education, but when they, you know, move on, the university gets more expensive. So in other words, taking a framework for not just curriculum planning, but for financial planning, financial aid planning, all the way through the bachelor's degree. Again, taking ownership of students getting a bachelor's degree, even though you don't own that bachelor's degree. So this was a cursory overview, but on our website and on Aspen's, we have these templates, these assessments for both community colleges and universities, so that you can, you know, take a look. And we've done this in a number of states where we've done this in workshops with 2- and 4-year faculty and staff and others from 2- and 4-year institutions to go through this and see how you stack up against other colleges. We also have developed guides for community colleges, although we've also run similar measures for universities using clearinghouse data to see, you know, what are the, not just what is the completion rate for your students, but where are they going? Which institutions are they going? And what's their graduation rate? And then very importantly, what are they majoring in? Based on the types of degrees they're getting. And you can see here we have resources for focus groups, including icebreakers, and no icebreakers, thank God, but you know, that you guys could use in Michigan, adapt to your purposes, to look at these kind of, bringing 2- and 4-year folks together to look at these data and figure out how collectively you can address these. The last thing I'll say is we're beginning to see across the country movement beyond just a focus on transfer, and like we talked about, starting with dual enrollment, but really looking at regional, what I would call, we can call it supply chains, because this is Michigan, a regional talent supply chain or a regional talent pipeline, where universities and community colleges working with employers and the K-12 schools are, helping students get on paths to especially bachelor's degrees, associate and bachelor's degrees in fields of economic value to their regions. And they're reaching down increasingly in places like Virginia, Northern Virginia, places like Orlando, and Phoenix, to the poorest schools, the K-12 schools, starting in middle school, and getting students on a path. George Mason, working with Northern Virginia, has worked on this for over 10 years, and they have 15,000 students from the poorest schools in Loudoun and St. Charles County in this pipeline, and they have changed. They've not only increased the rate at which students go to the community college, get degrees, and then transfer to George Mason, which is a regional public 4-year, but they've dramatically changed the complexion of those students. Many more African-American Latino students transferring to George Mason and getting bachelor's degrees, 80% of students getting bachelor's degrees, compared among transfers compared to national average of about 60%. So what we're saying, and they're doing this in part because of their mission, but also because this is creating a supply chain of students who will be coming to your community college. So it's, creating a supply of enrollment for the community colleges and the local universities tied to, the economic needs of the state and of the region. So that's really the next frontier, and I don't think we're going to really be able to do this successfully, especially address the equity issues and make sure that the products, the degrees we're turning out meet, the needs of our students and our local economies without this kind of regional collaboration. And in Michigan, you guys are decentralized. I'm saying decentralized is king. So, we want to see lots of these regional partnerships forming in Michigan.
Davis, we had a question. Can you talk a little bit more about the types of resources that George Mason used or their partners used to achieve those outcomes? How do they allocate those resources?
Right. This was a big effort started by Bob Templin, who was president of NOVA, Northern Virginia, and the president of George Mason, whose name I can't remember. And they signed these big agreements with the local superintendents of their counties, those Northern Virginia counties. And I don't think they may have raised grant money initially, but right now at scale, 15,000 students, this is paid for by all three parties. And it's a very high level so that, in other words, the boards know about this, the school boards, the community college board, the university boards, they pay for it themselves. And again, it's partly to address their mission, but for the community college, and for the university, these were definitely an enrollment play. For the community college, Bob noticed that in Northern Virginia, which as we know is a very high-tech area, you got to have a bachelor's degree in many fields, including in the high-tech government fields that are employed in Northern Virginia. For George Mason, they're a regional and they can't compete with University of Virginia in terms of status, but they can compete by creating this pipeline of students connected to local job, careers and building support from local industry. So I'm saying and when superintendent, this is so popular among parents and community groups that when a new superintendent comes on to a district, they will buy into this as well because the school boards understand this. Again, this takes a long time, but I think it's really going to take regional effort. And in rural communities, I think it's going to take a statewide effort because I think we're going to be honest, as beautiful as it is up there in those Upers, many of those students are going to have to leave and get bachelor's degrees elsewhere and, send money back, come back. anyhow, but so
Great.
regional and statewide kind of efforts.
Okay. So just thinking about what we're doing here in Michigan, and I appreciate you saying that about our rural communities too. In George Mason and in Northern Virginia, it sounds like a lot of this is around addressing some of the issues that you addressed earlier on in your presentation, that credit law, the advising piece, the seamless piece. So did a lot of the focus was in those areas?
Yes, but initially, and especially in the K-12 schools, huge focus on helping students do career and college planning and exploration
and did they do that with
of
advisors?
areas of interest.
Okay, well, new advisors and
they do it through lots
or?
of groups. They do it with, well, in part, but you know, the high school counselors are, you know, they do it more as a collective act. My sense is, and you need to talk to them, my sense is that a lot of it comes from the college and the university, because, you know, high school counselors are just way overburdened. The second piece of it is, I know they bring in community groups and employer groups to do internships and for high school students and projects for high school students, and you know, you know, science things, but they tie it to the paths to the baccalaureate. In other words, you know, so you can, so in general, more and more, I mean, we're convinced at CCRC that yes, students' academic preparation is a problem. Students are not academically prepared coming out of high schools for community colleges and universities, but that's not the fundamental problem. The fundamental problem is they don't have a sense of direction or what's even possible, and they don't have, if they have interests, a path that they could pursue. That's the first thing. And then we have to assume that because they're not academically ready, they're going to need help. They're going to need help. If you're interested in, you know, social and behavioral sciences, you're going to have to take statistics, and that's hard, and you're going to need help. But so this is a different mindset, I think, we in higher ed and education. We got to get away from this remediation thing. Yes, students will need academic support. I'm not saying they're ready. They're not. But let's talk about helping them explore what they might be interested in, get a taste of it, get a plan, and recognize that they're going to be Accounting 101, American History, Civilization 101, Anatomy and Physiology 101, Chem 1. Those are all going to be hard courses. And how can we support students who are on paths that include those courses to succeed? And how can we start them on that path in high school?
Got it. I think that's a great message about helping students figure out.
You thought this was going to be about transfer.
Right.
This is about creating supply chains for the future of Michigan.
Right. We also had another question. Can you, you know, Michigan does not have a strong performance funding model. Our performance funding model is largely on new money that colleges get. We're not like Ohio that has, you know, 100% performance funding. Can you talk about how performance funding you think has impacted this work?
Michigan does have performance funding. In Michigan and certainly in the Midwest and New England, performance funding is tuition. Because states in Michigan are disinvesting in public funding for higher education, which used to, I don't know the exact numbers, but in Michigan used to be, even 10 years ago, certainly 2030 was much higher share of the revenues. More and more colleges in Michigan are depending upon tuition, which means that the currency for both community colleges and universities, especially the regionals, is FTE. And this is fundamentally what is driving this work toward pathways, is that the understanding that, you know, we're just churning out students through all these methods, you know, through inefficient transfer, through the levels of held dev ed, through the inacuplacer, and not harnessing students' interests and curiosity, and creating a plan that they can have agency to follow. you know, in order certainly to have better outcomes for our students, but also to generate more FTE and increase the rate at which students not only transfer, but they go to, you know, Eastern Michigan, or they go to wherever, and they don't have like they're not coming with 90 credits and their Pell Grants expelled. They're coming knowing, you know, exactly what the university, their major is required, and they're ready to hit the ground as juniors. So that's the economics of it. Performance funding, I mean, the good thing about performance funding is that it sends a signal to colleges that outcomes matter. Performance funding doesn't really work for many reasons. Like, let's take Tennessee. You know, there's all this talk about Tennessee's performance funding. Well, and indeed, it does account between 20 and 40% of their community college and regionals revenue, the performance funding. But it's such a complicated formula that you can never really figure out, you know, how you move up and down. It tends to be a zero-sum game. And in Tennessee, even though Tennessee colleges, especially the community colleges, have dramatically improved their resources or their performance and should be earning more money, the legislature for the past couple of years has flat funded them. So at the end of the day, I'm sure I'm never going to be able to come to Lansing again and speak to your legislature, especially on the right. And I won't mention when I'm in the state to vacation there. But the more important thing, you do have performance funding, and you have it big time in Michigan, and that is tuition. And this is true everywhere in Ohio, Tennessee, tuition, except for California and North Carolina, where the tuition is too low. And I don't talk about them, but the coin of the realm is FTE, and we've shown, and other people have shown, that colleges and universities will generate more FTE by retaining students than by churning them through. And the way to attract and retain students anymore, we believe, is to offer not cheap courses, but affordable programs that students complete in a reasonable amount of time and in a time frame that they know what they're going to complete in. In other words, every student should know exactly how long it is going to take to complete, which hasn't been the case in community colleges, and I think to some extent 4 years as well. But that they're completing programs that will lead them both to advancement in the labor market and further education. And obviously for community colleges, that means further education to the bachelor's level. But for universities, increasingly, you know, people need graduate degrees, and universities more and more are making money, profitability through their graduate programs, which is good. So this isn't just about transfer, you know, this is about really creating an education pipeline that is affordable, but also high quality.
Well, Davis, as usual, this was 1 hour very well spent. I learned.
Well, I don't know. That's what you're saying. These other people are like.
I'm sure I speak for all 80 people that were on the line that they agree. I think it's wonderful for you to share the data, and then also let us hear your thoughts on some of these innovative practices and transfer. And I'm already thinking about tuition as performance funding. I'll credit you with that when I use that. Tuition is performance funding in Michigan. Yep, I will credit you with that when I repeat that.
I mean, we've seen a number of your colleges. We just came out with a thing on Guided Pathways, featured Jackson College. It's not the only college in Michigan that's doing a lot of stuff, but, you know, Dan Phelan went to his board, raised tuition, and used that money in part to hire new advisors. And when we went there, everyone there, the union, everyone understands that how much they have to increase FTE in order to recoup the amount of revenue that, you know, was raised, or that the board agreed to increase tuition by, in order to cover that. So this is the new name of the game. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
they and every other college are having to front load the investments of this because our Yahoo legislators are disinvesting, and they talk about performance funding, but they're not giving us. But the point is, again, this is becoming a more Dickensian, dog-eat-dog world, and we got to compete on affordable programs that lead somewhere in a timely way. That's how we're going to compete, I'm convinced.
Well, great. Well, thank you, Davis, on behalf of the Center for Student Success and all of the attendees. I appreciate your time today. Really appreciate it. For everybody on the line, we will have this recording available and the slides available for you to review, and we'll share that on our website at www.mcca.org. So thanks again, Davis, and we'll look forward to talking with all of you again. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for your great work.